I was telling you about Bologna. Is a great city, apart from food, for the startup ecosystem is buzzing. Content creators, musicians, artists. Bologna is a crazy city.
Oh, I love it here. It's interesting. I never had stepped foot in Bologna before I moved here.
Hmm.
So I moved here sight unseen, not knowing what I was getting into, and I think I picked the perfect place in Italy for myself to live. So I'm very excited here.
Wow, that was a great choice. You did like I've chosen my latest tennis racket based on the name, and that's it. I didn't try to say, did you try? No, I mean, I just bought it. I think it was a great name. That's it. But why did you move to Bologna?
Well, so first, we picked Italy. So I was living in San Francisco, and our daughter went to a really amazing school in San Francisco. It's considered a Reggio Emilia school, so it has a lot of the teachings and philosophies of like the Reggio Emilia education
Right.
philosophy. And then we thought, okay, um, once I left Airbnb, we thought, okay, maybe we should have a change of scenery, live abroad for a little bit. We decided Italy to kind of keep my daughter's Italian going. In San Francisco, they spoke to her in Italian, so she had a decent understanding of the language. And then the next question is which city? And we got mixed reviews on a bunch of cities. Some people love Rome; they say it's too busy. Some people say Florence is beautiful, but there's a lot of tourists. And somehow we ended up in Bologna, where there's a good international school. And we've once again never stepped foot in Bologna. Arrived, and every day I'm here, I love it more and more. And usually some Americans, they get tired after 6 months. I'm
Yeah.
8 months in. I want to be here for a few more years at least.
Oh, wow, incredible. I mean, last time I've been to Italy, I brought my family there. My wife, she's British, and they were in love. Yeah, but also because it's a kind of city that you can go around, you can walk around. It's not like Rome, that is
Hmm. Yeah.
with all my Rome friends, it's a chaos, Rome. And it's a disaster. If you want to move around, it's a disaster. But I mean, Bologna has a definitely good mix. What about the startup ecosystem that you found there?
I haven't really been too indoctrinated into the startup ecosystem here outside of Music's Match, where I am currently.
Right.
But what I've noticed is the universities here and the couple companies and couple students that I've talked to, the engineering in Bologna, but just across Italy, is really strong, very very strong. And I think that there are ingredients for a really robust tech ecosystem in Italy and in Bologna.
Yeah, also a lot of young, let's say that it's not an old city, so it's a
Hmm.
young city.
Yes,
So
yeah.
there's a lot of experimentation. I was telling you about the content creators. I know at least 3 YouTubers that are from Bologna, and they're like millions of followers. I mean, and they do really interesting stuff, and they mix it with music. So it's very interesting. Sometimes it's funny how you completely underestimate maybe a city like that because you know Milan and Rome and
Hmm.
so it's interesting. What's the plan there? What are you going to do in Bologna?
So, the plan is the first plan was to change of scenery and to have, more time with kids. And as I've been here, I've become a lot more active as a mentor, advisor, investor, and especially like within Europe, learning more about the European tech ecosystem. And then more recently, I have become excited about being more helpful to the Italian tech ecosystem. I'm really grateful that Italy gave me a visa, has allowed me to stay for a few years, and my way of giving back is, okay, can I be helpful to the Italian tech companies? But one thing that's kind of interesting, that's maybe different from Italian tech than, for example, French tech. French tech has a hub, and it's Paris, but in Italy it's kind of spread out. So you have, Bologna, you have Torino, you have Milan, you have Rome, you have Florence. And so like there's no real sense of, a center of gravity. But what's great is that Bologna is like right in the middle of all those things. So nothing is more than a 2.5 hour train ride. And I can wake up, be in Torino, have some meetings, come
Yeah,
back in time for dinner.
yeah, definitely. I was chatting with a friend here in Brighton. I live in UK for 10 years now, and he's an Italian living in London, and we were both saying the same thing. It's unbelievable. Italy, we have a lot of talents. There are some great companies. Music's Match, Max Chochola is a great example of a successful founder. In the fintech, I'm thinking about ScalaPay, Satispay. So you have there some interesting companies, and you have a lot of incubators, accelerators, startup accelerators, and so on. The problem that we both were trying to discover there was it's so difficult to create a network in Italy. It's so difficult to collaborate. I don't know why. For me now, it's easier to collaborate with international people that they don't even know who I am than with Italians that know who I am. And I find it crazy. I say, guys, or all the why don't you create something together, instead of always competing? I don't know what you think about it, and what was your experience also in US about it?
Yeah, I can kind of see that the argument, because it's so spread out that it's hard to get concentration, critical mass in one area to be excited about it. United States, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, everybody was in tech. Just like in the same way, you go to Los Angeles and everybody's in the film and entertainment industry. And so you had these collections of people who all have the same interests. And I haven't felt that yet in Italy, and I'm not even sure that's necessary anymore. And that the question remains for me is, with remote work and now any Italian engineer can work anywhere, what is the future concept of a tech hub? Like, what does that actually mean? What purpose does that solve? Maybe Italy being spread out could still be fine. But that's, it's something that I think is and has been historically an issue. I just don't know how it's going to play out with remote work.
What's your take on the global situation at the moment? Because I was checking this morning all the layoffs from the tech giant, tech players freezing new hiring, Klarna, I don't know, firing 700 people, something like that. Inflation skyrocketing, Ukraine war. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Of course, as a entrepreneur, you are anyway optimistic and say, yeah, but I'm gonna do it anyway, and you don't care. But what's your take, and what could be a suggestion on how to ride this roller coaster?
Yeah, I mean, these are really unfortunate times for many, many reasons. But one thing that struck me about Airbnb, the company was founded 2008, 2009 during the middle of the financial crisis. And they've built a model that was extraordinarily robust in a financial crisis, that was then able to thrive over time and then also weather the pandemic. And so, kind of extrapolating from that, I think that you might see companies kind of hunkering down, being more focused, trimming the fat, and really focusing on building something of extreme value that is very, very robust. And so the next couple of years could be tough, but the fallout of that is, over time, we might see some really, really innovative ideas that exist when things hopefully start to get a little better. And then that's what I experienced at Airbnb. I'd also say that we've lived in a world where startups are getting an incredible amount of money to start at the seed stage with really high valuations. And I think we'll probably see a lot less of that. But I think that's a really good thing, because constraint will breed a lot of creativity. And I think the best ideas are when you don't have a lot of resources and you have to focus, you have to find like the nugget that's really, really critical, double down on that. So I look forward, the next couple of years are kind of painful, but I look forward to the aftermath of that in terms of what kind of innovation we're going to see.
Got it. By the way, I think Airbnb is a great example of company that, for instance, got hit very, very hard with the pandemic. And then I remember Brian Chesky coming on an interview at the beginning of pandemic, and it, everyone thought, wow, that's gonna be very bad. But what are you gonna do? No one can travel. But the company got it right. I don't know, got the right moves, and now it looks really, really good. How was working with Chesky and the founders there?
Ryan was my boss for most of the time I
Right.
was at Airbnb. And I mean, he's a really big thinker, and he's someone who also, in a crisis, some of the best parts of him come out. And so, we weathered multiple crises at Airbnb, and every time I was always amazed with his ability to keep a cool head, keep really focused, and do the right thing. Oftentimes, that right thing is very hard to do. But I think in the pandemic, it was one of the most difficult things we ever dealt with. Without already the pandemic's pretty scary just on a humanity level, but to also see your business drop 70-80% almost overnight has got to be, for all of us, was so scary. But it also was a time where we said, okay, well, we have to focus. We have to, not do all the things that we thought we're going to do. Everything has changed, and to go back to the roots of what Airbnb is. It's a really great place to stay at a really great price where people want to. And it turned out that once the pandemic life, became a bit more normal for people, or the everyday for people, all of a sudden folks wanted to go nearby, but somewhere outside of the cities. And our business was set up to do that. And we were able to, you know, um, run campaigns around that and really kind of shift. And then the people themselves were just coming to the platform, searching for longer stays nearby. And our platform ended up handling it well. And we ended up ending the year with a successful IPO. So it's an example of kind of what I was talking about earlier, where it's just, if you really, really focus on the essence of providing value,
Mm.
you could be surprised what kind of conditions you can survive through.
Interesting. By the way, that while you were talking, I got this crazy memory of Airbnb. Do you remember Lisa in Venetia at the beginning?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I worked very closely with them. Yeah, I
Okay.
just saw I
So,
just saw Lisa a few weeks ago. Yeah,
oh, really? So I
yeah,
remember they came to Italy for a sort of tour. Airbnb was still very, very young
with the with the
company.
with the capes, probably, right? They had Superhost capes. Yeah.
And they came to Italy and they said, no founders were there, but they came and say, look, sort of ambassador of Airbnb to do some interviews or try to have the media talking about the company. And no one wanted to talk about Airbnb. And I had a television show on Sky TG24, which was like the Sky News Italy. And
Mhm.
I went to my director saying, look, there is Airbnb. And no one knew about it. And I said, no, but they are a cool company, blah, blah, blah. So I finally convinced them to let me have these two girls as guests. And they came, and imagine you talk on a national television about, yeah, you can rent your room of your house. I mean, I got so many complaints, from journalists saying, "What? This is fake news. This is what? What are you doing?" I said, "No, it's a real company." It was so hard to explain at the beginning, but anyway, yeah, I was thinking about that crazy moment, and
No,
then boom.
I remember when they were going on their tour, and I remember them preparing, and they were getting the capes ready, and we may have even watched that segment, back in the office, just because it was just for us, like 10, 15 people in this tiny little office, all of a sudden seeing our name more and more on the international stage. That was so exciting for us.
But when did you enter the company? Very, very early, right?
I was the ninth employee, so we were still working out of the apartment. I was the third software engineer. And you enter the apartment. Well, first of all, this threw me off at first because I had been previously in a corporate environment, and then
Right.
before that in academia. And I walked in, and first thing is you take your shoes off. And what office do you take your shoes off when you enter? But it was an actual home. Joe and Brian were still living there. You go down, and then just the energy of the apartment and the energy of the company was so palpable. It was very strong. It was very optimistic, very bright. And uh, a few of us worked on the product with the founders, maybe three engineers. We were in one bedroom, and then all of customer support and Venetia and all of them were in a different were in the living room, and then when there was a problem with the website, we would just scream from one bedroom to the living room, "Hey, something's broken, go fix it." And it was just,
Well,
yeah, it's almost almost the most efficient I've ever experienced working in a company is when you just have a living room and a bedroom, and you can just yell at each other, and it seemed to work in the early days, but of course we had to grow and get more sophisticated.
how was the interview? Who did interview you?
Man, the interview was really intense. I had to interview with 12 to 15 people. And it's interesting because I told you I was number 9. And so like half these people weren't even employees. I think they were interns. Um, I had to do 2 phone calls, like screening phone calls to make sure like, okay, is this guy an engineer? Is he a fit for like this kind of business? And then I had to do a 3-hour take home test for coding. And what was interesting was that I had just moved to San Francisco and the rent was already very high in San Francisco and I couldn't
Right.
afford furniture. So I was like sitting on the floor of my, and I was like in credit card debt and everything. So I didn't have no couch. So I'm sitting on the floor writing my 3-hour coding test. And then I apparently did,
Sorry to interrupt. What language was the coding test? What,
I
Python
think
or?
I think it was Ruby. So I had done in grad school, I had learned Ruby. And I think at the time, Airbnb was largely Ruby on Rails, and so I knew that, and so that was a big plus is that I was familiar with the language. So I did it all in Ruby, and then we moved to in-person interviews. The company was getting too big. It was still an apartment, but like all the rooms were full. So I remember, one of the co-founders, Nate Placharzik, who was a CTO at the time, he had taken me to a grocery store, and we sat like in the food area of the grocery store. He interviewed me. Then I had to go to a different restaurant, and Joe and Brian interviewed me. And I was so confused during my interview with
Right.
Joe and Brian because Brian was asking me questions like, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? What's your theme song when you enter a room? And then I could tell things were kind of going well. They wanted me to meet every single person that was in the office. I think at that time they really cared about cultivating a really strong trusted dynamic across people. So they wanted people to buy into the next hires. And, I did the same thing when we hired our next engineers. I was, on day 1 of joining the company, I was already involved in interviewing people,
Wow.
which is also how fast we were moving.
How was moving from a company, a small startup, to a large size? Because, for instance, I never worked for a big company, and max I can handle, I think, 10 people, and then I kill the company. If I am with more than 10 people, I'll destroy it. I'm not done for it. So how was this this super fast scaling, bliss scaling of Airbnb from inside?
No, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of excitement. I think none of us knew that it was going to get as big as it did. And I think there were moments where we'd like pick our head up and be like, wow, we have like all these offices around the world now and all these employees in different countries. And there were moments where it was surreal. And I think the way sometimes it got challenging is that the needs of the company would sometimes outpace the processes we'd have in place. When you hire more and more and more people, you can't run the same process of being like, I mentioned the apartment where things were really like easy to communicate. You have to create new processes. And I think what was shocking was how fast you had to continuously evolve your processes, and actually just even introduce process, because I think a lot of startups, they
Mm.
don't want to have a lot of process.
Yeah.
But the reality is when you have 150 people, it's different than 10. And you don't need a lot of process for 150 people, but you need something. But when you have 5, 6,000 people, um, you have to spend a lot of time communicating, getting people on the same page, and having processes to make that efficient. And so I think there were times where maybe we had a bit of resistance to that because we wanted that startup vibe, but the reality is it's inevitable, I think, as a company grows.
And did you focus on product all the time? What was your main passion over there and focus?
So I had always wanted to be, I was I studied computer science. I have a PhD in synthetic biology, which I, by the way, never used at Airbnb. Um,
Nice.
we never did biology at Airbnb. And part of that PhD was I built a web app and Rails, Ruby on Rails. And so I started Airbnb as a software engineer, but I knew I wanted to be in product. But I made a gamble and I said, listen, I'm going to learn more about product sitting next to Joe and Brian, who are great designers who were trained at the Rhode Island School of Design in the United States. They're going to help me understand product better if I sit next to them than if I join, Google or Facebook as a product manager, super down in the stack.
Right.
And so I started doing engineering tasks, and we didn't have any product managers. And I started doing engineering tasks. I built our first professional photography program. And what happened was more and more, I was doing less and less engineering things and doing more product things. And eventually we made that official. Became the first head of product management, first head of product for Airbnb. And I did that for about 5 or 6 years. And then towards the end of that, Brian Chesky, myself, and a few others, we started exploring the next businesses beyond homes for Airbnb. And then after we launched Airbnb Experiences, I took over as the head of Airbnb Experiences or general manager of Airbnb Experiences, and then ran that for about 3 years, and then
Got it.
started to wind down.